we'll be diving into the nostalgic and absolutely beloved fictional universe of Pokemon. But instead of simply recreating dishes from the games and movies like I normally would, I thought it would be a fun twist to reimagine some of my favorite Pokemon as foods, rank them on accuracy and taste, to hypothetically answer the question, which Pokemon would be the tastiest? Okay, I know it's a bit morbid to think about eating your Pokemon, but I promise I'm not doing whatever this is. So sorry for making you watch that. But back to the topic of nostalgia, I remember watching the TV show on Cartoon Network as a kid and collecting the cards and toys here and there. But to be completely honest, I've always been more of a Digimon girly at heart. However, with the crazy resurgence of card collecting this year in 2025, the Pokemon nostalgia has definitely been hitting me again. So warning, this is going to be a very long and nerdy video, so get comfy, relax, and let's get right into it. I thought it would be fitting to start off this video with one of the original starters, so Bulbasaur, I choose you. I just cringed myself out, but he's number one in the Pokedex, number one in my heart as well. I just remember absolutely loving Ash's Bulbasaur in the anime for some reason. Like he was just a sweet, reliable little guy. But okay, let me know if I'm the only one. This is definitely a cabbage, right? Turns out it's a literal plant bulb, hence Bulbasaur. But anyways, it also sort of resembles a Chinese bao in my opinion. So we're turning Bulbasaur into a steamed bun, topped with his very own veggie stuffed bao bulb. First, I'm putting together a simple bao dough. Add the dry ingredients to the mixing bowl. That's flour, specifically cake flour here, so that the baos get super cloud-like and really fluffy, along with the sugar and the yeast. To keep up with the vegetal theme we have going on, and to also naturally color the dough, I blended a handful of spinach into the milk and added that to the bowl as well. Gave that a quick mix before transferring the dough onto a floured surface and kneading everything with my hands for a solid 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, once it's looking nice and smooth, sort of like this, I let it rest somewhere warm for at least 1 to 2 hours. On to the filling. Like I said, I could have sworn it was a head of cabbage, so you know what? I'm doubling down and I have some finely chopped here. Also adding in some sliced mushrooms and scallions, but you can use whatever vegetables you prefer here. Crumbling in some firm tofu, just with my fingers. Adding grated ginger and garlic, soy sauce, sesame oil, and a dash of sugar to finish it off. Yeah, super simple. That's our veggie filling. Now I'm dividing the dough into 3 sections. About a third of the dough we're keeping green, a tiny bit we're coloring black, and this is where things start to spiral, so buckle up. Okay, so in my head, mixing blue food coloring into green dough would make, you know, like a blue-green color, but apparently not, because the more I added, the more neon green it got. At this point, I was not really feeling it, so the sun was setting, and I just decided to deal with this the following day. Day 2, I remade everything, and I even steamed this tiny version just to make sure that the colors were accurate. However, fast forward a couple hours and yeah. I mean, the colors look great, but he's definitely looks more like a very wrinkly Venusaur and not the cute little Bulbasaur we're going for here. So I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, day 3, game plan. 1, make 2 smaller buns, and to work a lot faster so that the dough doesn't overproof this time. Starting with his bulb, I grabbed a small piece of the green dough and rolled that into a roughly 3-inch wide circle. Then I placed 1 heaping tablespoon of filling per bun and carefully crimped the dough up and around the filling, sort of stretching, pleating, and gathering the edges into a spiral at the top. They should look something like this. Very cute. Next, for his body, I took a large ball of blue and rolled that into a stubby log-ish shape, cutting roughly 1-inch long slits into each end. I'm turning these into his arms and legs.
I call it bold and brave.
And at this point, he really looks like a mini rotisserie chicken, so I'm adding on his head and ears with a little bit of water, followed by his bulb we made earlier, and finally placing on these smaller details here. I let these guys rest for a good 30 minutes before steaming them for another 10, and yeah, they're definitely cuter than my last attempt, but still very disturbingly wrinkly. So, the 4th and final day, thank goodness, I realized I was misreading my own recipe this entire time, so please rewind to day 1. You know where I said to proof the dough for an hour? I let it rest somewhere warm for at least 1 to 2 hours. Yeah, don't do that and jump right into forming the buns. This was where it was overproofing. Also, don't forget to let them finish steaming for an additional 10 minutes with the heat off before you open the lid. This should help our wrinkling problem, and I just wanted to let you know that I had nightmares about this for the entire week. I'm so happy to say, voila! They're definitely still a bit wonky, but with how much I struggled over these, they're now my literal children and I love them dearly. The bao themselves are really light and fluffy and are slightly sweet, and that paired with the umami savory filling is so good. So these are getting a 6.5 for accuracy and a solid 8.5 for taste. Off to an interesting and pretty good start, I'd say. Our next victim is another iconic Pokemon, but for different reasons. Honestly, justice for Magikarp, because the entire franchise basically just bullies him. To name a few insults, he's often referred to as the world's weakest Pokemon, a pathetic excuse for a Pokemon, useless, helpless, worthless, the list goes on and on. Unfortunately, we're only going to make the situation worse by eating him, and for that I'm deeply sorry, but I'm also very excited to turn Magikarp into some red bean taiyaki, which are these super popular Japanese fish-shaped pastries. The night before, I got a head start on the filling, which is a sweetened red bean paste. Not only because it's traditional here, but also because in the games, their preferred foods are apparently plump beans and bean cakes. So to a saucepan, add your adzuki beans or your red beans, along with enough cold water to cover them. Bring this up to a quick boil, then allow the beans to simmer on low for at least an hour. This definitely requires some patience, but as soon as the beans are completely soft throughout, you can blend them into a smooth paste or keep it a bit chunky if that's what you like. Transfer the mushed beans back into the pot with some brown sugar and a pinch of salt. And then you're gonna give this just another couple of minutes over the heat until the sugar and salt fully dissolves and you're happy with the texture of the red bean paste. The next morning, I immediately got started on the batter. Into a large mixing bowl, place all of the dry ingredients: cake flour, sugar, a pinch of salt, the baking powder, and the baking soda. Give this a quick mix. Then grab a small mixing bowl and whisk together the eggs and the milk. And quickly combine the two just until you get this thick yet airy batter. Here's my taiyaki pan. When researching for this video, I saw that there are vendors in Japan selling magikarp taiyaki, which I'm so jealous about. But I also stumbled upon official Pokemon pans on eBay, which were a bit out of budget. So my plan is just to make a bunch of these normal ones and figure out the rest later. But yes, this was definitely a trial and error learning process. So here are some taiyaki cooking tips I learned along the way. 1. Don't be greedy. Let's not overdo it with the batter. 2. Don't be too stingy either. Make sure to fill in all the crevices and completely cover the filling with batter as well. 3. Don't forget to flip the pan. Allow these to cook for 2 minutes on the first side and 3 minutes on the other. 4. These have a tendency to burn really quickly, so don't go over medium-low heat. And once you've got the hang of it, just repeat that and make the rest of your little fish. Now while those cooled, I got to do some crafting. So I made this stencil mapping out all of the different features that we need to add, and I'm using that as a guide to pipe them out in royal icing, which was very, very satisfying. And then I realized that these take 8 or so hours to fully dry, so the next day we can finally put everything together. Okay, I'm not sure if this is the easiest way to do this, but kind of similar to a cake pop. I stabbed a stick through each fish before drizzling them over with melted chocolate, just making sure every spot is covered and jiggling them a bit at the end to make sure that the coating isn't too thick either. Random fact, sweet potatoes make great drying stands for cake pops if you're ever in a pinch. But anyways, all we have to do now is add the final decorations. The outside coating was definitely a tad bit much for me personally, so let's go with a 7 for accuracy, 8 for taste. Yeah, definitely -2 for the excessive coating on the outside. I'm obsessed with how these turned out. I know I cutesified him quite a bit, but he still has that derpy quality to him. If you've never tried a taiyaki before, it's pretty similar to the texture of maybe a waffle, and that together with the sweet, earthy creaminess of the red bean filling is just perfection. Last but not least, we have a rather controversial pick. To some, she's really cute, while to others, she's a menace to society. It's the icon, Jigglypuff. I remember being very amused by her antics in the anime, and I don't know, maybe I'm just annoying because she happens to be one of my favorites to play in Smash Bros as well, simply because my siblings get super annoyed with me because I would basically just spam her lullaby over and over again. But yeah, I think 8-year-old me just found her really cute, and you know what, I still do. But yes, Jigglypuff's main shtick is that she puts people to sleep whenever she sings, hence the lullaby. So I thought it'd be super cute to turn her into this honey lavender cream puff, which I'll break down as we bake. Since it takes a couple of hours to chill, the night before I got a head start on making the cracklin. Place softened salted butter, brown sugar, and salt into a small mixing bowl. Give this a quick mix before folding in the flour. Then you transfer this cookie dough essentially onto a piece of parchment paper, cover it with another piece, and roll this out to as close to 1/4 inch as you can get it. And this just goes into the fridge for at least 2 hours, or in my case, overnight. Then the following morning, we can work on the filling. Fun fact, Jigglypuff's name in Japanese is burin, which means custard pudding. So that's what we're kind of basing our filling on here. And lavender is known to have soothing and relaxing properties. So I thought that would be a perfect flavor for our pudding filling custardy thing. So grab a jar, which you're going to add the milk, some purple food coloring, and the dried lavender flowers too. Pour this lavender infused milk into a small saucepan and bring it up to a simmer over low heat. While that infuses even further, whisk together the rest of the custard ingredients. For that, you'll need egg yolks, sugar, cornstarch, a pinch of salt, and vanilla paste for taste. Wow, that rhymed. Now once it reaches a nice pale yellow color and almost doubles in volume, go ahead and gradually incorporate in the warm milk. This process is called tempering. We're basically making sure not to cook the eggs here. Once this mixture is mixed, add it back into the pot and gently cook the custard over medium-low heat, whisking constantly until it looks something like this. Now that we have the jiggly portion done, set this aside to cool and we can get started on the puffs for our jiggly puffs. Take a saucepan, add the butter and sugar, plus the milk and the water. Place this on the stove over medium heat. Bring everything to a quick boil before tossing in the flour, mixing vigorously with your wooden spoon. And you'll know the dough is ready once you start to notice it clump together into a rough, scraggly looking ball. Let it cool slightly. Next, add in the eggs one at a time. Now, how many eggs you'll need can vary. I'd say anywhere from 4 to 7, depending on their size. But basically, after every addition, you want to check the batter to make sure it's nice and smooth. And eventually, it should fall off your spatula like this, so that it isn't too liquidy or too thick when you go to pipe them. Topping each of these with a disc of the cracklin. This gives the puffs their very satisfying, crunchy, crispy shells. That's going to be a great contrast to all of the creaminess that we have going on so far. Now once you're ready to assemble the cream puffs, prepare the quote-unquote pudding whipped cream. I thought it'd be a nice touch to sweeten this with honey since it works really nicely with the floral lavender flavor. Super excited about this flavor combo. For our secret ingredient, we're adding a few spoonfuls of instant pudding mix for both flavor and to help stabilize the frosting, which will hopefully make decorating a little easier. And yeah, just whip this up like you normally would a whipped cream until about medium stiff peaks, because it'll thicken as it continues to sit. Then finish off the filling by folding a few scoops of this into the cooled lavender custard. And the rest of this will be for our little jigglypuffs. We can finally assemble everything. I grabbed a pastry shell and sliced off just the very top, enough to be like a little hat for her later. Then into the hollow center, I piped a very generous amount of our lavender custard pudding filling. So in my head, I was envisioning Jigglypuff sort of chilling inside of the cream puff and peeking out of it almost. So I started with a dollop of pink frosting for her body, adding more pink frosting for her ears, and I think this is her hair. Once I was happy with that, I piped her tiny features with brown, white, and blue frosting here. And finally, finishing with my favorite detail, her tiny arms pulling herself out of the cream puff. And this made me realize that cream puffs are such an underrated dessert. Like, it's the perfect balance of crispy, soft, creamy, fluffy, everything. And the honey lavender turned out to be this perfectly delicate spring-like flavor that matched Jigglypuff so well. This might be my favorite of the bunch, but I'm curious to know what you think. I mean, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I'm leaning towards an 8 for accuracy and a definite 10 for taste with this one. Which means, drumroll please, Jigglypuff is our current reigning champion for the title of tastiest Pokemon. Not sure if that's a good or bad thing, but congratulations! That's everything I have for you today. I had the best time making this video, so let me know which Pokemon you think could potentially taste better than Jigglypuff, and maybe we'll just have to test that out next time. But as always, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!